So we're taking some bigger bites out of this so we can scoot this on and get out of the book of Job. I just ordered a bunch for the church, and then I got this information the first of this week, or the last week rather, and so I've got a stock now, but hopefully they'll be all gone pretty short. Yeah, hopefully we'll get rid of all of them. Yeah, we'll have. Yeah, I normally don't put the phone number when we order them. When they send samples, it often does. But yeah, we got a new number. All right, well, let's pray, and then we're going to jump into chapter 29 of this book. Lord, we bow to thank you for your multifaceted blessing in our life. You bless us when we're here and there, and when we're home and when we're gone. I want to thank you for this pervading spirit of compassion and grace and protection that you have on you people. I'm grateful for the group that went to Atlanta. And a lot of seed was sown there, and we don't expect seed to grow immediately. Sometimes it does, but Lord, a lot of seed was planted, and I pray that folks after the game and the hubbub and the excitement of that will go home, and while they're in their quiet moments will read that and give their hearts to you as a result of that work. Thank you for those who have chosen to be here tonight. Bless us in Jesus' name. Amen. When you read Job, historically, I have read it, you just kind of like a buzzer dropping down on something to eat. You just pick up a little bit here and fly off and pick up a little bit here. But that's not the way any of the Bible is written. There's a continuum in the book of Job. And where we are in the book right now, we're tonight are going to hear Job's last speech. He won't say anything else, with the exception of a very few short verses later on when God steps onto the scene here and starts talking. But this is it. Won't hear any more out of Job after this chapter. And it is a true mark of grace when a desperate longing for a lost happiness turns out to contain within itself the seeds of future happiness and a greater destiny. But here's what happens to a lot of people. They have a major happiness in their life, and it gets removed, and they're not happy for the rest of their lives. They put so much weight on that thing that when that thing is gone, their happiness is gone. And I know spouses do this to one another. Parents do this to their kids or their grandkids. Or children do this to their parent. My whole world, don't. My whole world was not my dad. My dad died in 2010. And I can't say that he was my whole world, because when he died, then my whole world would have been disrupted. And can I tell you, I'm not being brutal about that at all, because I love my father with all my heart. But that didn't crush my world. It confirmed what I knew to be true, that it's appointed unto man once to die. But there was a greater happiness, and there's a greater happiness in our lives than our spouses, our kids, and our grandkids. I think this makes life bearable. I mean, what if there was nothing greater than the relationships that we have on the human level? What if that was it? Well, then I can understand somebody just collapsing and giving up life. But the past has this magnetic hold on us. Have you ever noticed that? Yeah. Well, people have a tendency to decorate the past with joys that might not have been present to the degree we believe they were. Well, do you remember when Israel, they were in the wilderness and been there for a long time, and they started saying, they were sitting around a campfire one night. You remember when we were back in Egypt? You remember how great that was? Man, we had these salad bars of leeks and garlics. And man, it was just wonderful, the good old days. Well, if I'm not mistaken, they were state-owned slaves, if I'm not mistaken. And they were the national labor force, and so I'm not quite sure that it was as grandiose as they think it was. And we often have a tendency to glorify the past because that ain't going on right now, you know. Oh, I wish I was still in high school. I'm glad I ain't in high school, you know. There's just a lot of things I'm glad are past. C.S. Lewis, one of the greatest Christian writers of the last century, said this, quote, "Most people would know that they do want and want acutely something that cannot be had in this world. There are all sorts of things in this world that offer to give it to you, but they never quite keep their promise. The longings which arise in us when we first fall in love, or first think of some foreign country, or first take up some subject that excites us, are longings which no marriage, no travel, no learning can really satisfy. There was something we grasped at in that first moment of longing which just fades away in the reality." End quote. In other words, when you get it, maybe it's not what you thought it was going to be. That's the way man is. You know, these young people, and I've heard counseling, in pre-marriage counseling, they have such a Pollyanna view of marriage. We're just always going to be happy. And we're never going to have a disagreement, you know. And I'm like, oh, my word, you know, huh? And the first thing I tell a young couple in pre-marriage counseling is this, and this is the truth. I said, if I can, my job here in this first meeting is try to talk you out of this. And if I can, I'll do you the best favor that I could ever do you. Because it's better to figure it out now than 5 years into a marriage with 2 kids in the bedroom. You know what I'm saying? And so Job is in specifically chapter 20. Every chapter tonight, 29, 30, 31, different. It's going to smell different. It's going to feel different. It's going to be the texture is going to be completely different. And so he's going to be very versatile in the way he's using his terms tonight. And in chapter 29, here's sort of the theme. Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away. Now, looks as though they're here to stay. Oh, I remember yesterday. It's just how wonderful it was, and now look at me now. All right? So, look in chapter number 20 or 29, verse 1. Moreover, Job continued his parable, and the word parable means discourse. So it continues talking, and he said, "Oh, that I were as in months past, in the days when God preserved me." He didn't know he was still being preserved. It just doesn't look like preservation right now. Look in chapter 16, or the 16th Psalm. Let me read you something. In Psalm 16 and verse number 6, I believe it is. "The lines are fallen unto me in pleasant places. Yea, I have a goodly heritage." That's Job right now. Boy, I remember when, the farm was good, the animals were grazing on the hills, and the shepherds that were on my staff, they were taking care of this. And oh my goodness, we had the ladies were running around the tent, and they were preparing meals, and the kids were sitting around, and we were laughing, and we were watching YouTube, and it was just wonderful. We just had a great time. And his candle shined upon my head. Remember those days when it just seemed like God's direction was everywhere? And when by his light I walked through darkness, even when things did get a little bad in life. You remember, Mom? It just seemed like we knew what to do. God just seemed to have his light on us, and we knew how to walk. "As I was in the days of my youth, when the secret," and the word secret is counsel, "when the counsel of God was upon my tabernacle," or my home, it just seemed like he could do no wrong back in those. You remember those days back when you were young and you didn't hurt when you got out of bed, You remember when those carefree days when you were living at home and you didn't have a clue what a car payment was? I remember the first car payment I made was $61.35. I had a Plymouth Roadrunner, and man, then I was like, well, I got to pay for this. You know, it cost me $1,300, and I had to pay $61.35 a month. Oh, for the days of a $61 car payment. You know what I'm saying? All right. Yeah. When the Almighty was yet with me, when my children were about me. Oh, my, remember those days? Now he's going to get a little allegorical. He didn't do this literally, but this just gives you an idea of how wealthy he was. When I washed my steps with butter, and the rock poured me out rivers of oil. And that's like the guy saying, I lit my cigars with a $100 bill, sort of a thing. So this is not something that was literal, but it was just an allegory of how wealthy he was. This guy was a multi-millionaire, all right, in this part of the world. When I went out to the gate through the city, now he also was involved in local, I guess, politics. He was very civic-minded. And when you sat in the gate, what this was, walled cities, that was a sign of a big city. That was a major city in the Old Testament if it had walls around it. If it didn't have walls around it, it was nothing. And so there would be walls. They built walls to keep undesirables out, so they built walls. There was a gate, like these doors we have back here. And just inside the gate, there was a place where the elders would sit. Now, they didn't have elected officials. You got in this little group by being old and wise. Job was one of those. Matter of fact, he was the chief old guy. He was the most respected. He was so respected it's ridiculous. They almost worshiped this guy, all right? And so he goes out to the gate through the city when I prepared my seat, or when I took my seat in the street. And so here he's joining these elders, sitting probably on the floor. The young men saw me and hid themselves. I was so respected, these guys didn't even want to approach me. The aged arose and stood up. I remember those days. When I came into the city, when I walked through the gate, and when I approached these men, the old guy stood up, and the young guys got out of Dodge. They just could not imagine being in my presence. Verse 9, the princes refrained from talking. Oh, shh, there's Job. Everybody needs to hush. Job's about to talk. And they laid their hand on their mouth. The nobles held their peace, and their tongue cleaved to the roof of their mouth. So we are talking about a man that is respected probably like people just aren't respected today. You know, this is going to be pretty amazing. When the ear heard me, then it blessed me. In other words, when Job would give his opinion or give his judgment, people would be like, wow, thank you for that. I needed to hear that. He was a blessing to people. He encouraged people. He assisted people. And when he would smile his blessing on you or speak his blessing on you, it was like, thank you so much. Man, I appreciate your hospitality. Yeah, kind of that way. So when the ear heard me, it blessed me. When the eye saw me, it gave witness to me. Yeah, there he is. That's the guy. That's the guy you need to hear. Because I delivered the poor that cried. Do you remember the charge in chapter 27? Job, here's why all this stuff's happened to you, buddy. You have forgotten the poor. You have neglected, on and on and on. This is, you know how you get to be respected? You don't demand respect. You command it. And the way you command it is by behaving yourself wisely and with great grace toward people. And so he says, when the eye saw me, it gave witness to me, because I delivered the poor and the fatherless and him that had none to help him. The blessing of him that was ready to perish came upon me, and I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy. And again, you remember the charges, the accusations. You left widows. I mean, you didn't do anything for them. He actually did. This was all fake news back in chapter 27. These are accusations that have no foundation. Job did all these things. And so these widows would come to Job, what can I help you with? Well, they're about to kick me out of my tent. I can't make my payment. They said, don't worry about it. And Job would make the payment for them, and people would come, and they wouldn't have anything to eat. Strangers. He was the Hotel 6. The light was always on at Job's house. All right, verse number 14. I put on righteousness, and it clothed me. My judgment was as a robe and a diadem. In other words, I dressed myself in purity. I dressed my life, my heart. I was decorated with wisdom. I walked with God, and it wasn't just something that I put on and took off. It was me. That was the way I was, and he still was, by the way. Yes, ma'am. He is. Verse 15. I was eyes to the blind, feet was I to the lame. Blind guy says, Job, I need this taken down to the business for repair. I'll take care of it for you. So Job would take the blind guy's chair down to the furniture store and get it repaired for him and bring it back. Another guy said, Job, I can't walk. I've got some problems, and I need to get this payment. Don't worry about it. I'll take it down there for you. So folks that need to go to the doctor, Job took them. Need to go to the grocery store, Job took them. You could always count on Job. And so all this stuff these guys have charged him with is just a bunch of hooey. Verse number 17. Then, when push came to shove, he says in verse 17, or 16, I was father to the poor, and the cause which I knew not, I searched out. If somebody came to me and said, did you know, no. But I tell you what, I'll do some research on it. So he'd jump on the internet, and he'd Google whatever he needed to Google, and there it is, and he'll take care of it. Job was the kind of guy that knew where to go to get what he needed. Okay, so he'd research this stuff and find out what was needed. Verse 17, I break the jaws of the wicked and pluck the spoil out of his teeth. So if like a bill collector came to a widow and says, you either pay me or you get out of this house, she'd call Job. I'll be right there. And Job comes down, and he took care of things. All right, so he would always protect and defend these people that had problems. Verse 18, then I said, I shall die in my nest, and I shall multiply my days as the sand. This is what, I remember the days when I'll never have any trouble. I'm helping all these folks. I'm respected. Now, it almost sounds a little arrogant, but it's really not. And he says, I just thought that the rest of I would just live this great big long life, and I'd always be able to help people. I'd always have enough money and food and all this, and that's what I thought was going to happen. I multiply my days as a sin. My root was spread out. Had 10 kids. Man, he had his roots spread out all over the place, and the dew lay upon my branch. I mean, again, he was a fruitful man as far as having children was concerned. So he had a big family. My glory was fresh in me. My bow was renewed in my hand. That is what that means is he was strong enough physically to have kids. All right? He didn't get so old that he couldn't father children anymore. Unto me men gave ear and waited and kept silence at my counsel. And so when Job spoke, everybody shh. He just got deathly silent because they knew they were about to hear something they weren't going to hear anywhere else. They were going to hear some counsel, some direction, some wisdom that the average guy at the gate didn't have. I mean, Job was just at another level. Verse 22. After my words, they spake not again. In other words, when I said what I needed to say, there was nothing else to say. You couldn't add to it. You couldn't adjust it. You couldn't edit it. So there was just nothing. My speech dropped on them. And they waited for me as for the rain. And it's part of the world. Rain's kind of a rare deal. And you're anxious for the rain. You're praying for the rain. And so Job was like, when I spoke, people, they waited for me to help them. They waited for me to bless them. They stood like farmers out in a dry field, please, Job, rain your wisdom on us. And so he was a big deal, all right? They opened their mouth wide as for the latter rain, waiting for me to drop my words. If I laughed on them, and the word laughed is the word smile, so if I smiled on them, they believed it not. It was almost like, here's a guy, and he's just got all kind of problems, and he just doesn't have a way out, and here's Job. Job looks at him and goes, it's going to be all right. And the guy just, Job said it. If Job said it, it's going to be all right. I just can't believe he looked at me. Y'all ever met anybody famous? Who have you met, John? Who? Dale Earnhardt Jr. Right. John, who'd you meet? Who? Okay. Okay. Hey, anybody else meet anybody famous? Andy Williams. Oh, wow. Andy, anybody else? Who? Oh, okay. Who have you met? Wendy Bagwell. I met Mel Tillis at Farmer Jones Red Barn in Plant City one night and went over and talked to him. He didn't stutter one time. He did not stutter. Invited him to church and everything. And we carried on a conversation, and it was like, yeah, right. Oh, wow, okay. Nanette Fabry? You met Nanette Fabry? Nanette Fabry? Really? Wow. Sarah, who have you met? Okay, all right. Now, who'd you met? Oh, I thought you had your hand up. You know, you shake somebody's hand or whatever, and you're like, I'll never wash that hand again, you know. Folks that I really respect, I have them sign my Bible. And I got a bunch of signatures. I got Dennis Swanberg signed my Bible a number of years ago, and it's just like, you know what I'm talking about. You meet somebody that's kind of well known, and you're like, I talked with them. I mean, they actually spoke words to me. And so, anyway, if I laughed on them, they were just like, Job smiled at me. It's going to be okay. The light of my countenance, they cast not down. I was a big deal. All right, I was a big deal. I chose out their way and sat chief and dwelt as a king in the army, as one that comforteth the mourners. That's what I was, the good old days. These guys, I used to help people. I'd give them money. I'd give them food. I'd give them the fleece off of my sheep so they could stay warm. He said, I was the Walmart. That was the Job Mart of my part of the world. If you needed something, you came to my house. Now, we're going to have a different aroma in chapter 30, because in chapter 30, Job's going to shift his focus, and what he's focusing on now in chapter 30, he's going to give a rundown of the punks that he used to help that now are spitting in his face. I used to help you, man, and you talking to me like this now? You treated me like that then, and now I need you, and that's chapter 30. But now, they that are younger than I, these guys that used to run and hide when I walked in the gate, that were just so impressed with me, well, they have me in derision, whose fathers I would have disdained to set with the dogs of my flock. I wouldn't have had their daddy watch my dogs. And you punks. I mean, he's mad now. He's a little upset. These guys. So that's a pretty good shot to the throat right there. Talking about the man's daddy like that. But he did. All right, verse 2. Yea, whereto might the strength of their hands profit me, in whom old age was perished? I need these guys. I need somebody to help me now. I help them, but they don't have any time for me now. For want and famine, they were solitary, fleeing into the wilderness in former time, desolate and waste. These guys, let me just put it this way, and this might be a little crude, but you guys were trash. Y'all were low life. I wouldn't have hired your daddy to watch my dogs. and now you're treating me like this. And so a little bit of resentment going on here. All right, verse 4. Who cut up mallows by the bushes and juniper roots for their meat. These guys they'd eat weeds. Okay? They were so poor that they were eating these mallows. By the way, a mallow grows in a marshy area, and it was kind of like it wasn't a cattail, but it was one of those. It was a reed that grew up in marshy areas. And as a matter of fact, it's where we get our word marshmallow from. But this was a marshmallow, and a marshmallow was a plant. And if you ate marshmallows, you were pretty poor. All right, so that's what these guys were eating. And they had juniper roots for their meat. They were driven forth from men. They cried after them as after a thief, probably because they were. You know, they break into somebody's house and steal something, and they're running off. You know, somebody's hollering, thief, thief, thief. And so we're looking at a kind of a low-class people here. But these are the guys Job used to help now, okay? To dwell in the cliffs of the valleys, in the caves of the earth, and in the rocks. Y'all didn't even have a house to live in, and I took care of you. Among the bushes they brayed like a donkey. Under the nettles they were gathered together. They were children of fools, yea, children of base men. They were viler than the earth. Anybody not understand what he's saying about these guys? Yeah, he's and here's the part that just kind of decorates this with some pretty primary colors. They were standing around the circle. Yeah, these folks that he's talking about is hearing him talk about them like this, all right? Verse number 9. And now I'm their song. Yeah, now I'm their byword. Job is an idiot. Job is, you know, y'all remember when kids used to do that? They would make fun of folks. Now, these low-life people whose daddy I wouldn't have washed my dog, and I helped them. I paid their bills, and I gave them clothes, and I gave them shelter. And now they sing these songs of mocking about me because I'm in need. You know, I'm where I am now. They abhor me. They flee far from me. Spare not to spit in my face. They don't mind spitting in my face. Now, these are the same kids used to run and hide when I walked in the door, just out of sheer respect. Now they come spit in my face. Somebody didn't raise their kids right. You know, somebody did a really poor job in training. You don't treat people this way. And I mean, you don't, even somebody that's wealthy, you don't treat them any differently than you do anybody else. You know, I mean, they put their britches on the same way you do. They're people that have needs. They need to be encouraged. They need friendship. They need all just like everybody else. And Job was a millionaire, and the stock market went south, and he lost it all. He should have been treated with as much dignity and value as he should have been treated when he had money. But these guys are just, and now they're writing songs about how, look at you now, big boy. You know, so I think Brother Tom mentioned it several weeks ago. There's a whole lot of jealousy going on here. Now they're glad, you know. Now you're one of us. You're one of us now. Ha, ha, ha. They abhor me. They flee far from me. Spare not to spit in my face. Verse number 11. Because he hath loosed my cord and afflicted me, they have also let loose the bridle before me. God has turned me loose from his care, and they have turned their mouth loose on me. He's cut the bridle on me and just let me wander off to be destroyed here. And so that appears to give them the permission to just start shooting their mouth off. And we've got poor folks in Hardy County that they don't make a whole lot of money. They sit. There's an old gentleman that sits down here at the store on 17th, over right across from McDonald's, that little store right there. And he's just as valuable to God as anybody in here. Just as valuable, just as important, just as much grace. If he's saved, it took just as much grace to save that man as it does anybody else. And I think we need to teach our kids, first of all, we need to do that ourselves. Our kids ought never see us mistreat people, never. I don't care who they are, what they have, what they don't have, doesn't matter. Verse number 12. Upon my right hand rise the youth. They push away my feet. They raise up against me the ways of their destruction. Now I'm just in their way. And here, I've seen this happen, and I'm sure you have too. You've got a patriarch or a matriarch in a family, and as long as they're healthy and as long as they have something, you know what I'm saying? Oh, my goodness, anything I can do for you? And they're there to do this and mow the yard and da-da-da-da-da-da. And then one of them dies or they go broke. And for some reason, kids just don't come by anymore. You know, friends just don't stop by anymore because they don't have anything to give them now. And I've known of situations where as long as say the patriarch is alive, everybody gets along. When the patriarch's gone, they're like buzzards at each other's throat. I know a case, this was a family in Georgia a number of years ago. Patriarch passed away, and the kids seemed to get along as long as everybody was alive. But when the patriarch died, right after the funeral, I'm talking the day of the funeral, those kids descended on that house like a herd of buzzards and fought like cats and dogs to get stuff out of the house. And it was just like they hated each other. And the only thing that kept them at bay was Daddy was still there. But when that was removed, when that barrier was removed, then what they really were appeared. And so now these guys that were so impressed and so respectful, they just shoving him out. Get out of the way, old man. You got nothing for me. Get out of the way. 13. They mar my path. Can I tell you what that means? They used the bathroom where he was walking. So he'd have to walk either through or around or in that stuff. So they mar my path. They set forward my calamity. They have no helper. They came upon me as a wide breaking in of waters in the desolation. They rolled themselves upon me. These punk kids, I used to help their daddy. I used to pay their bills. I used to give them food when they were, I used to do all these things. And now they're like it's like a tour over the sewer in a glass bottom boat. Terrors are turned upon me. They pursue my soul as the wind, and my welfare passeth away as a cloud. They don't care anything about me. And now my soul is poured out upon me. The days of affliction have taken hold upon me. My bones are pierced in me in the night season, and my sinews take no rest. He's sore all the time, has pain. By the great force of my disease is my garment changed. It bindeth me about as the collar of my coat. In other words, Job's skin, he had what we think was like leukemia of the skin that had these big running sores. And you ever put a Band-Aid on a running sore and then that dries? And then you take that off? So Job's robe got stuck in that mass of infection, and it was a pretty painful deal. So that's where he is now. Verse 19, he hath cast me into the mire, and I am become like dust and ashes. I cry unto thee, and thou dost not hear me. I stand up, and thou regardest me not. Now he's talking to the Lord. Thou art become cruel to me, and thy strong hand opposest thyself against me. Thou liftest me up to the wind, and causest me to ride upon it, and dissolvest my substance. Now again, let me ask you, who was behind his calamities? Satan was behind all of this. He was the driver, he was the engine, but who's getting the blame for it? Even a godly man is mistaken here in his accusation. Yeah, exactly, being deceived. For I know that thou wilt bring me to death, and to the house appointed for all the living. Howbeit he will not stretch out his hand to the grave, though they cry in his destruction. God won't even help me there. Did not I weep for him that was in trouble? Was not my soul grieved for the poor? Nobody is weeping for me. Nobody is grieving for me. When I looked for good, then evil came unto me. And when I waited for light, there came darkness. And look at me now. This is where I am. And look at all this stuff, going back to chapter 29. Look at all the stuff I did. I was this, I was that. I gave them this, I gave them that. And, some of these young men that are spitting on me now, they were the first ones at my door wanting some hominy grits and, some bacon. That was, by the way, Job was not a Jew. So we're going to get into a section in the next chapter where he makes a covenant or an oath. He puts himself under. And it's not a Jewish oath because there were none at that time. All right, verse number 26. Yeah. When I looked for good, evil came. My bowels boiled and rested not. The days of affliction prevented me. He had some digestive issues, and it was just, well, y'all had stomach flu. I went mourning without the sun. I stood up. I cried in the congregation. I'm a brother to dragons and a companion to owls. Well, guess where he's living now? He used to live in a pretty nice place. Now he's out in the landfill, and he's got lizards and owls and buzzards. Those are his friends now. My skin is black upon me, and my bones are burned with heat. So he's sunburnt. He can't go home. The wife won't let him go home. My harp is also turned to mourning, and my organ into the voice of them that weep. Wow. This is what I am now. This is what I was. This boy, I long for those days, and I used to do y'all like this and that and the other, and now look at where I am, and look at what y'all are doing to me, considering how kind I've been to you. And chapter 31, there are some oddities. There's going to be something amazing, as a matter of fact, in chapter 31, and it's toward the end of the chapter. But he's going to begin, and this whole chapter is basically like a curse that he self-pronounces. If I am lying to you, may these things happen. If my heart is not clean and my conscience is not pure, may these things happen to me. So that's sort of the intent. We're shifting gears again. So now we got a little different aroma again from chapter 29, and a little different in 30, and now in 31. Job is ending his speeches. This will be the end of it. And so as he closes, he is putting himself under this weight of an oath. I promise you. These are the things that I have done. These are the things that I have not done. I give you my word. My heart is pure. Okay? So now look at verse number 1. I made a covenant with mine eyes. Why then is translated, how could I? So let's read it that way. I made a covenant with my eyes. How could I think or cast a look upon a young maid? Now, we in these verses, there's a deal, I think, that every man struggles with. And this is the pull of a female, whether this is wife or not. There's not and I'm certainly not going to ask for a show of hands, but there's probably not a man in here that's not struggled with this very issue. But this is not what Job is. Job is not talking about, I have this problem all the time. This is a general oath. I am telling you, I have done none of the things you've charged me with. All right? For what portion of God is there from above? If a man, if his heart is not pure, what will he inherit from God? What will God give the guy whose heart is wicked? And the most obvious illustration that he could give of a wicked heart is a guy that can't keep his hands off of women, all right? What inheritance of the Almighty from on high? What are you going to inherit if you do this? Is not destruction to the wicked, and a strange punishment, and strange means extraordinary, an extraordinary punishment to the workers of iniquity. Will God not punish wicked people in an extraordinary fashion? He will. I believe in degrees of punishment in hell. Jesus said on one occasion, it's going to be more tolerable for Tyre and Sidon than it will be more tolerable. It will be less brutal. And so I don't know how this works, but I think that a guy like Hitler is going to experience some and is experiencing eternally extraordinary punishment. And every lost person goes to hell, I'm aware of that. And I don't know how God, this is his business, it's not mine. But there's going to be an extraordinary punishment for people who live lives like we're talking about right now. Doth he not see my ways and count all my steps? Yes, he does. Does God not see where you go and what you do? Sure he does. Does he not hear every conversation we have? Does he not know the websites we go on our computer and on our telephones? And does he not, oh, well, by the way, does he not know the process of the mind before it ever becomes an action? Can he not read the mind like you can read a book? Absolutely he can. If I have walked with vanity, now he's getting into his oath here. If I have walked with vanity, or if my foot hath hasted to deceit, let me be weighed in an even balance, that God may know mine integrity. All right, here's what I'm willing to do. If I have done these things you've charged me with, if I've done that, then I challenge God to get the scales of justice out and put me in the scales of justice. If I have done these things, then I am going to be found wanting. And there's going to be some extraordinary punishment meted out to me, and that would be the right thing to happen. All right, verse 7. If my step hath turned out of the way, and mine heart walked after mine eyes. Now I want you to see it. There's a real neat declension of activity in verse number 7, and it starts with my step or my foot, the way I walk. All right. So if my step hath turned out of the way, and mine heart walked after mine eyes, and so we start with the feet, which moves to the heart, which finally moves to the hands. In other words, it begins with what I think, and then eventually I do what I think. And so if my step hath turned out of the way, and mine heart walked after mine eyes, and if any blot hath cleaved to mine hands, if I have in blot cleaved to my hands is if I have done deceit, if I have billed somebody for something that they didn't buy, you know, if I have cheated somebody somehow, is what he's saying there. Then, okay, if I've done these things, then let these things happen to me. And so beginning of verse number 8, these will be the supposed consequences, or the consequences that Job says, let this happen to me if I have done those things. Then let me sow. Let me get out in the field and work. Well, I have more workers. They're gone. And so let me sow and let another eat. I won't even eat. If I have done these things, I'll plant your food, I'll grow your food, and you can eat. I won't even eat it. Let my offspring be rooted out. If mine heart have been deceived by a woman, and the word deceived is enticed. So if I have committed adultery with a woman, or if I have laid wait at my neighbor's door, waiting for him to go to work, waiting for him to go on a business trip, and I slip in the door and I sleep with his wife, if I have done that, which evidently was part of the catalog of charges against him, if I have done that, then, verse number 10, let my wife grind unto another, and let others bow down upon her. Need I translate that for you? If I have done this to somebody else, then let that happen to my wife. Let men in the area have their way with my wife sexually. Now, that's a pretty strong conclusion right there, you know. If I have done this, let this happen to my wife. He's pretty sure he's not done that, right? I mean, this is a pretty good statement that Job's heart's pure. These guys have been wrong the whole time. And they've just repeated themselves. They're just like parrots. Well, the reason that it's happening to you is because you're wicked, and you know, and they've never changed. Same tune, same station, same song. And Job is the one that has changed. Job he came into it singing their song, and then all of a sudden his life collapses, and he's like, I haven't done any of these things. Oh man. So apparently we're wrong in our worldview. Well, they still haven't changed their mind, but Job certainly has. All right. Verse 11. For this, or adultery, is an heinous crime. Yea, it is an iniquity to be punished by the judges. For it is a fire that consumeth to destruction, and would root out all my increase, or my children. A man who commits adultery with another woman, or a woman that commits adultery with another man beside her husband and beside his wife, is destroying his family. It's destroying it. This happens constantly. It happens in Hardy County. This is no, oh my goodness, wicked people over yonder. No, this is a human event. Y'all know it, I know it. It happens in churches. It's happened in churches in Wauchula. It has torn churches up in Wauchula. Because people think that they're either so powerful or so wealthy that they can get away with it. You cannot. You cannot. The bodies always float. Always. And so Job is saying, I have not done this, and if I have, may my wife be used by every man in the community. Verse 13. Now, not only was he a husband, but he was an employer. He had people working for him. And so he's shifting now his focus to his workers. If I did despise the cause of my manservant or my maidservant when they contended with me, if people came to me with a problem, I'm just shut up and go to work. I don't have time for it. If I did that, what then shall I do when God riseth up? If I did that, what would God do to me? If I treated people that way, what do you think God, and they were thinking his buddy, well, I'll tell you what God would do to you, what he has done to you. You know, wake up, dude. And when he visiteth, what shall I answer him? If I've done this and this stuff comes on me, what do you say to that? And again, they're like, what you've been saying for 25 chapters is what you would say. So, but they're wrong. They're absolutely wrong. Verse 15. Now, this is so advanced to me. Now, keep in mind, this is pre-Scripture. The book of Job takes place between Genesis 11 and Genesis 12. All right? This is the oldest book in the Bible. And this guy's thinking like this. Did not he that made me in the womb make him, my servant? All men are created equal. Whether you the boss or whether you the janitor, you are equal, on equal footing with everybody. And did not one fashion us in the womb? Did not God make? Why would I treat my servant like I was better than he was? I'm not. We were both manufactured in our mother's wombs, and we all had the same process together. Verse 16. If I have withheld the poor from their desire, or have caused the eyes of the widow to fail, or have eaten my morsel myself alone with hungry people looking through my window, if I did that, and the fatherless hath not eaten thereof, if I refuse to feed people like you say, for from my youth he was brought up with me, as with a father, and I have guided her, that's the widow, from my mother's womb. So this was, Job apparently did this before he was rich. He's done this all of his life. He was raised right. His parents taught him, if you have the wherewithal to help people, you do it. You get into their lives and you bless them. You do what you can to help them. And so he's just always done this. Notice all the ifs. Verse 19, if I have seen any perish for want of clothing, or any poor without clothing, if his loins have not blessed me, and if he were not warmed with the fleece of my sheep, if I didn't provide clothes for people, he had 7,000 sheep. You think he could afford a jacket or two? You know, got all kind of sheep, all kind of wool. He clothed people all over this area. If I have lifted up my hand against the fatherless, and this is a statement, when these elders would meet, there was some kind of a vote or an approval that was taken, and we're not sure exactly how they did it, but let's say here somebody came to the city elders and they were requesting some help, and if Job said, nope, I vote we don't do it, he said, if I've done that, but he didn't, he always helped. He said, if I have lifted up my hand against the fatherless, when I saw my help in the gate, when I could help and I was able to do it, if I didn't do it, then let my arm, the same arm that voted no, let that arm fall from my shoulder blade and mine arm be broken from the bone. May that happen to me. 23. For destruction from God was a terror. I have feared God all my life. I've known that if you do wrong, you're going to pay a price for it. Said, I've always known that. And by reason of his highness, I could not endure. You cannot stand against God. Said, I know that. And when you do the wrong thing, God's going to come against you and you can't stop it. Verse 24, if I have made gold my hope, or have said to the fine gold, thou art my confidence. If I've done that, if I have sat on my 401k, if I have sat on my investments and said, nothing can hurt me because I got enough money to ward it off, I can pay it out, if I've done that. If I rejoiced because my wealth was great and because mine hand had gotten much, if I have done that. Job was not an arrogant man. He was a multi-millionaire, but he was a humble man. So I've never looked at my money as the source of my strength. It's always been God. It's always been God. And I love people who have resources that have this attitude. You know, they've got wealth in this world and they've got wealth in that world, but wealth in that world means more to them than wealth in this world. I love folks like that. Now he's going to get into his religious expression. And he says in verse number 26, if I beheld the sun where it shined, or the moon walking in brightness, and my heart hath been secretly enticed, or my mouth hath kissed my hand. This is a reference to idolatry, ancient idolatry, and every culture has worshipped planets, sun and moon and stuff like that. And he said, if I have ever in my life looked up at the sun or looked up at the moon and said, and they would, and we call it throwing a kiss. If I've ever, of course you can't touch the moon, but I can send the moon a kiss by way of airmail. I can do that. He said, if I have ever done that, if I have ever looked at the planets and secretly been enticed, and if I have granted personality to the planets for the purpose of worship, if I've ever done that, and the Jews did that, by the way, and the Egyptians worshipped the sun, and people all over the world have worshipped planets and stars and stuff like that. But Job, living in this ancient culture now, he has no Bible. There is no Bible on his coffee table in his tent. There is no Bible. He, by virtue of his knowledge of his past, and we got to hustle up here because I want to get to something here. Look at verse 28. This also were in iniquity to be punished by the judge, for I should have denied the God that is above. If I rejoiced at the destruction of him that hated me, or lifted up myself when evil found him. Read Obadiah 12 when you get home, and you will find where the Jews were mocked because they were attacked, and they said, I've never done that. When somebody had trouble that was my enemy, I never rejoice. Neither have I suffered my mouth to sin by wishing a curse to his soul. I wish he wasn't rich. I wish he didn't have this, didn't have that. If the men of my tabernacle said not, oh, that we had of his flesh, we cannot be satisfied. In other words, everybody in Job's house had plenty to eat. If you were walking by Job's house, look at verse 32. The stranger did not lodge in the street, but I opened my doors to the traveler. I was hospitable. People had a place to stay. It was warm. It was safe. I didn't let people sleep in the street. If I covered my transgressions as Adam, whoa, by hiding mine iniquity in my bosom. How did he find out about Adam? There was no written record of this. The closest connection that he has to Adam is Seth. And so, word of mouth. These stories were transferred from generation to generation. Did I fear a great multitude, or did the contempt of families terrify me that I kept silence and went not out the door? When I heard a need, did I turn my ear and just pretend to be deaf? So I didn't do that. Oh, that one would hear me. Behold, my desire is that the Almighty would answer me, and that mine adversary had written a book. Surely I would take it upon my shoulder and bind it as a crown to me. In other words, I would swear an affidavit. I would sign an affidavit that I am innocent of these charges, and I would wear that like a hat, because I'm not ashamed to confess I have done none of these things. I'd wear it like a billboard. I would declare unto him the number of my steps. You want to know where I've been? I'll show you where I've been. You want to see what I've been doing? Here's what I've been doing. So as a prince, would I go near unto him? Now he's going to wrap it up. He's even going to call the land into the courtroom to testify. If my land cry against me, or that the furrows likewise thereof complain. If I have eaten the fruits thereof without money, or have caused the owners thereof to lose their life, let the thistles grow instead of wheat, and cockle instead of barley. If I have done these things, when I plant wheat, I pray sand spurs will come up. The words of Job were ended. Boom. Just like it's over. And we won't hear any more from Job. Again, except there will be a few little very short sentences that he'll say, but he's done. Thank you guys for being here tonight. We went a little long, but I want to try to cover Job while our snowbirds are here, and try to get through this as quickly as we can. But thank you so much for being here tonight. God bless you. See you Sunday morning, 10 o'clock. Lord, thank you for your goodness. We praise you. We honor you. We glorify your name. We're so grateful that you included this book in the 66 documents of inspiration. What a revelation this book has been. Bless us as we interact with people that don't have what we have. They're not blessed to the same degree that we're blessed. May we never ever treat people like they're inferior, because we've all been made on equal ground. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.